Oh my God, I love it. All right, is it
Gryffindor.
live? Sometimes Instagram does this thing, which is whatever. Instagram is Instagramming.
Can you guys hear me? Well, I am a self published author, and the book's called Can You Hear Me? So, in the book, I talk a lot about communication and some of the issues that I had with communicating with my adult kids, well, my teens turning into adults, with my relationship with my coworkers and my colleagues, and then also with the relationship in my personal love life. All three of those, communication and relationships, crashed and collided at the same time. Hey, that's me. Order my book. Can you hear me? Just in case you didn't know, sometimes I'm called Fran the Freight Broker. Why? What is a freight broker? A freight broker is someone who matches companies that are either trucking companies, fleets, or owner operators with other companies that are importers or exporters needing to move their containers to and from the port. This service is also known as port drayage or rail drayage. So what I do is I match the two together and I get paid a little fee. Hence why I have the little truck back there. Mm-mm. So if your container happens to need a bonded carrier, call me. You already know Customs Border Protection requires that if they're flagged to go to the exam site. If your container is overweight and you need somebody with the triaxle, call me. If your container requires refrigeration, call me. Now, there's one stipulation, y'all. I'm only on the West Coast, California, Oregon, and Washington. And then we also move containers into Nevada and Oregon. I would love to help. Let me know. You can reach me at our website, www.allamericanp, like Paul, L like Larry.com, or you can also call me 562-766-1932. My name. Jamie, can you see me?
I can see you.
Did you hear me?
Did I heard the commercial.
Oh, okay. Hey everybody, welcome. I was having technical difficulties.
That's okay. It's always when you're going to have them right as the show starts. I mean, when other
Well, everybody, I hope you enjoyed my commercial because I put a lot of hard work in it. And
well done.
We're just gonna go right in, Jamie.
Good.
Happy Friday, everyone.
Yes.
I have a special guest with us. Not only is she a guest, but she is also my Toastmaster sister. She is also a colleague and a cohort in helping the world heal. I would call her my fellow healing sister as well. And I'm just so excited to have her here. Jamie's background, just a bit of info on her. I don't know if she's still a comedian, but
at heart. Yeah.
She was a comedian. She's at heart. Right now, she provides coaching to people that could use some assistance and anxiety, maybe direction in their life. And she has tools and tips and tricks that she provides to people looking for an answer. And we, as a community of people, we gravitate to different personalities. So today, I hope that anyone that is hearing that this message will resonate with you in a way that will shift the trajectory of your life. So Jamie, if you can also share a bit about your background, because for some reason with this tech thing, I can't seem to find your profile.
Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. I'm here to do it live for you.
Cool.
As you said, my early career was in the performing arts. I majored in psychology and sociology and had every intention of just staying home and being a good girl and just being a counselor and working in a psychiatric hospital. And, things which we'll obviously get into, my life took a change in direction. And so I decided to throw it all up in the air, move to New York City, and start telling jokes in seedy nightclubs. So for 15 years, I was a comedian, and I absolutely loved it. I still do comedy shows. It was a perfect time in my life to have that career. And it has been within the past 5 years that I've had some aha moments where I really wanted to pivot from performer to public speaker and help people specifically with loss and anxiety and grief,
Mm.
show people and help people with that balance, because some of the darkest times of our life can actually turn out to be some of the strongest parts of what makes us leaders and what we can do to help put these things to work, because we all experience it. And so that has been my life for the past 5 to 6 years. And I am also writing my first book, or shall I say, stumbling through my first book. It turns out I'm a huge fan of the run-on sentence, and I
Likewise.
that go along with what's up here and getting it down there. But all kidding aside, I'm loving the process and hoping to have it out by the end of this year. So.
Oh man, can you imagine if there was no like English or grammar? I mean, we could say what we want.
If there was no spell checker or grammar checker, I would be, and I haven't even gotten to an editor yet, so I can't imagine what I'm in for. So
Hey, we set our own standards here.
we do, we really do. I have to tell you.
So you said that you worked at a psychiatric place as
That was
a.
my very first job. So I get out of college and I get this job because that was my major, was psychology. I was immediately drawn to the humanities. And so I did get a job. I worked for about 2 years, not very long, in a private hospital just outside of Baltimore, Maryland, where I'm from. I'm an East Coaster.
I didn't know that.
Yes, I grew up in Baltimore, Maryland.
Okay.
Photos. And my family is still there. I'm the only one who ventured west. And I would say after 20 years, they have finally stopped asking when I'm coming back. I'm like, I love you and I'm going to come visit. And thank you.
And like people that do move from their homes, tends to be the question. When are you coming back home?
Yeah, I'm going to visit. How does that sound?
Oh, goodness. Shifting back into the conversation about grief and that being like one of the most pivotal moments. Whenever I hear the word grief, I always think of the words heaviness, loss, and never looking at it, especially when that is being experienced in its moment. Just the shift in thinking is very, I think, from what I've seen and what I've observed, with myself and culturally, it's like, how do you make that something successful? Or, I mean, how does that pivot occur? What is that?
Exactly. Like? That's the number one question I get. My favorite thing to do with my clients is say, think about one of the hardest times of your life. And then I'm like, are you there? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, great. Let's start to build your leader. And they go, wait, what? I don't even want to talk about that time frame in my life. And the reason that I do what I do to talk about the personal side of it is I was 13 years old when my best friend was killed in a freak accident. I was 21 years old when my mother died of a heart attack. And I was in 2022, most recently, which was my aha moment to really switch into this. I lost my sister to cancer. So 3 fierce women in my life. And so, but as you hear my story, and for the people who are listening, what is incredibly important, though, for me to express to you is that don't ever think that your grief is less than someone else's. I think when people hear my story, they get a little intimidated, as though, well, I mean, I haven't really been through that. Loss and grief and adversity happen to all of us in very different ways. And there's different types. Relationship loss, breakups. I've been dumped. Who wants to be dumped? Nobody. You know, it's the worst. There's pet loss. There are people that come from broken homes. And so I think that what I talk about is understand that when I say the word grief and I say the word loss, I'm talking about anything significant, any significant loss that has changed you as a person or possibly changed the course of your life. Because I find that some people feel like, don't ever ask for permission to grieve. If you are grieving something in your life and it is a relationship or it is something that you think is like, well, I haven't actually lost someone. No, but you've lost something. And incorporating these into our lives and understanding the heaviness of it, and that it becomes part of our lives is the very first step.
You just mentioned something about don't ever ask about permission, or
Yes,
don't ask for the permission to grieve.
correct.
For people that are watching and may not know, what do you mean by permission to grieve? Like, are they not identifying that that's a moment of grief that they're
Correct.
having, or that that's a separation? Okay.
Or that somehow people think that some things that they go through aren't big enough. So
Mm,
that's what I want to make sure, because when I say the word grief, a lot of people automatically associate that with the physical loss of another human being. That is how we use it the most.
mhm.
But I believe there are people, and I know that now being a speaker and as much as I'm talking to people, that they've lost things that they don't somehow believe they're grieving over, or they're not aware that they're grieving over it, or they think like, well, I mean, yeah, I mean, I lost my job, but it's fine. Like, I'll get another job. And I'm like, wait a second, take the time to absorb what you just said to yourself, because something that you planned on has been taken from you.
Right.
A relationship you thought was going to last forever. So it's important for people, I think, to not feel like what they're going through isn't big enough. I think that people carry more than they're supposed to because they don't think that what they're doing qualifies as grief.
So, how do they get out of that mindset of them comparing? Because I think I hear this a lot when somebody brings up an issue,
Mhm.
or like you said, if people hear your story, you lost three major people in your life. They're like, dang, I lost, or I didn't lose. And then, there's that. I don't know if that's called, is that trauma bonding? Or are
I
they
think it is. I
trying
think
to
that
one
people
up
go,
somebody on the losses?
right, exactly. And they go, oh, I've lost too. But then they might feel weird in talking to me or talking to someone because they're like, well, I mean, I lost my cat, but it was a huge deal to me. So that's where I think I make sure that people understand. If you look left and you look right, you will always find someone who has possibly lost more, but it doesn't mean that it's not significant to you. And
Mhm.
we need to make sure in our lives. So I mean, and when I say permission, I just mean space. Give yourself space to absorb losses, especially in the modern age, as fast as we move. It's like these things can pile up before you even get a chance to just decompress and think about who you are now, how it's affected you, where you're going in your life.
I think that word that you used, permission, was perfect, because I sometimes when I think about, like I said, the word grief, the word I associate it with loss, that like permission, and we don't even realize too that we're also holding, like our body also tenses up, especially when talking about that kind of subject.
Yes.
And permission is like, oh, what do you mean permission? Like, did I just tell myself not to do this and I can tell myself not to do it again? Or like, that was a great word,
Thank
because
you.
holding space is like, all right, that's cool. It's a cool word. Yes, we are holding space for somebody emotionally, but also too, I think permission allows us to identify that our body is in a motion or is in a space of being
Yes.
captive. So,
And not only do we not sometimes want to look at it right away, and or maybe it's very difficult because it's very intimate, it's very emotional, and it's a very dark part of our lives. But then I think, to no fault of our surroundings, look at our professional lives. The professional environments that we work in are very sanitized. And I don't think it's out of malice. It's just that, there's a lot of people working in the same place. So they're like, don't bring your personal life here. Make sure you're about the business and let's get going. And so there's another place where you don't bring it. And then you go somewhere you feel like we need to create space where that story and that loss,
mm,
we can have the private space for it, have the emotional support that you need, make sure you get the counseling that you want, and have the people around you that help you. But what I pull from it, what I tell people to pull from, is take the strength, take the insights, take that, all of that purpose from that experience, and start to use that in your life. Because
mm.
if you take the time to understand your loss and you really take the time to understand what's going on here, you can always keep that private part private. Nobody needs to know. what you've been through in your life. You don't have to relive it every day. You can pull the parts of it, the really great, strong, purposeful parts of that loss, and take it absolutely into every part of your life. And then you're using it. You have it. It becomes more purposeful. And I think that people aren't getting there with grief because they're not. I notice that a lot of people are like, well, and look, I did this when, I was 20 something after my mom died. And, it was time to go into the workforce. I didn't want people to think that I wasn't ready to handle it. I'm like, I gotta do well. I want people to think that I'm, on top of it. And I found myself putting my loss over here in that compartment, and then trying to live the whole rest of my life over here. But what I wasn't doing was giving that the purpose it deserves. I needed to open that up. I needed for that part of my life to be able to stream in and to be able to move with me. And the process of doing that is protecting your privacy and uncovering your potential, uncovering who you are now versus who you were before that event happened to you.
It's interesting because like when you mentioned that, like having to separate the loss and the professional, we're compartmentalizing. And I was thinking, oh, okay, are we taking the things like you said, one place we can't express ourselves, or it's suggested not to express ourselves in that way.
It is.
But I guess as being the individual that's experiencing these two different places, I know that you said, to pull out whatever that positive thing is. I guess what looks like positive in that area? Like
exactly when you're looking at this whole
like
Jamie, what looks great over here? Can I just
my mom just died over here. What's great about this? Where's this
That's an excellent question that is always what my clients say. Wait a minute, you really want to talk about this? So excellent question. And the first thing is that to understand that the apparatus of what I'm talking about comes from healing. So no one is going to experience loss and next week be like, so here's what Jamie said maybe I should do. The first thing that we have to understand is that all of this comes, I never talk time frames. I will never assume anybody else's pain or anybody else's healing time, because connecting the dots between loss and life happens in everybody's own time. But once you feel like you are, and there is a strange time in everyone's loss of, post-divorce or breakup or a death or the things, the adversity, the people that come out, and they're living this new life and there's a lot that goes into people speaking to their families and being allowed to become this truer version of themselves. All of this is a process. And I think that where the first place to really indicate if you are ready to do this and when you are ready to do this, as I ask my clients and I ask my audiences, there's a question I'm going to ask everyone here. I don't want you to answer it today, but at some point in time, I want you to answer the question. How has overcoming loss helped you grow? And how have you changed? And when you are really ready to start going, oh, okay, I've got this. I've learned this. I understand this a lot more. You are in a position in your life to start to put this experience to work for yourself. You are ready to turn the losses, the lessons from those losses into a leadership in your life, whether it's just a leader of your own life. I don't mean that you end up standing, in the front of a boardroom. I just mean that you start to take control of your life back, that you start to become the leader of yourself, because there's the grief of the event. And then there's a secondary grief of coming to terms with the new version of yourself. Have you ever heard the cliche, there's no guarantees in life? Well, I'm going to give you one today. There is a 100% chance that loss and grief and adversity are going to change you as a person. And that is grief
You got to repeat that slowly. And
So everybody says there's no guarantees. I guarantee you this for everyone listening. There is a 100% chance that our losses and our grief and our adversity will change you as a person. It's just inevitable. And there is a profound sadness to that. I like the person that I have become, but I do know that I've lost parts of me along the way. Those moments, these things that we do, we have to understand that there are pieces of us that aren't the same. And that is its own grief in and of itself. But I can promise you that understanding those things, understanding how you have grown, and when you start that healing process, there is someone so much stronger and deeper and more powerful on the other side of that.
I just pictured when you said that we lose pieces of ourselves.
For sure.
That as we begin to be okay on our healing journey, that
Correct.
we end up talking to people or connecting with people that will give us the pieces that we lost back, but in a different format.
Correct. You're absolutely correct in that. So you're going to put your puzzle back together. The pieces just aren't going to fit the way that they did before. And there is a sadness to that. You know, was that younger version of me have a little more light? Yes. I will allow pessimism to take over a little bit more when days that I feel my losses harder than others. I understand that not all growth from loss is butterflies and wonderful things. You know, I have to be careful about patience. I can be a very impatient person, and I don't have the, need to run people over because I don't like them, but I have this feeling inside of me sometimes like you have to get out of my way because time, when you lose people and they're younger than they're supposed to be, I find myself racing in this lifetime for fear that it runs out from me. So there are parts of us that we have to gauge and that we have to start to understand and move through as you grow through these events. And again, it's different for everyone. But what is fantastic is that it is something that we can put to work. And there is a purpose to these things that we go through, to these events and these adverse moments in our lives. And that it's a really some of it's a lifelong process. Obviously, the things that you hear that I've gone through, it's a lifelong process. I'm constantly changing. I know that, the first thing I say when I give speeches is I put all this together today. I don't look this put together all the time. I have the lost string. Okay. It took a village. So we have better days than others. And there are days that I'm like, I have got this thing. And then there are days that it's standing on top of me like it was yesterday.
Yeah.
And that's okay. And there will be parts of us that don't maybe change in a way that we planned on. You're like, okay, I'm a little different in a certain sense. But it is from there that you can start to put it to work.
So there's two things. One, I understand that there's a grieving process, and I don't know what those stages are. If you could share those with people. And then the second thing is, this might be a dumb question, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
There are no dumb ones.
Okay, this might be a question that might be common sense, but whatever, I'm going to ask anyway. So are there any techniques or things that we can do in the space to help us, I guess, rebuild ourselves?
Yes.
Okay. So
it obviously goes in phase. So the 5 stages that we talk about in order is denial, and then anger, and then we go to bargaining, and then we go to depression, and then very last is acceptance. Full disclosure, I've never done these in order. So I love the 5 stages of grief. I want absolutely everyone to get the support and the therapy. And if you do them in order, good for you. And if you don't, it's totally fine, because I'm a little more Fight Club when it comes to grief. Like, I feel like you have to really do it and be okay with the fact that if you don't fit into a theory and you don't fit into it, it's totally fine. It's real. I mean, the 5 stages, I'm not here to say that they're not real.
No, I'm saying like people
But
when when people are approaching these things, like you said, life is not linear.
it is not.
So
And every person I've lost, I'll be honest with you, I have grieved completely differently. And not completely differently, but I mean, I was 13, 25, and almost 50. So it's a very different life. I'm in different phases of my life. But they were all very different. And then strangely enough, I grieved breakups more than I thought. I'm like, why do I care so much about this? I mean, I've lost so much. Why is this a problem? And I was just a little surprised by the things that tossed me around in life, considering what I'd been through. So it can be a very strange sequence for anyone.
okay.
So the first place, I think, I'm going to break it up into chunks as to where to start. I think the first thing that you're just simply going to try to do after loss is take a shower and feel like you're, just start your routine again, whatever that looks like, because doing things again in a routine and in a way after any kind of loss or any kind of look, if you lose your job, spend 2 days in bed. I'm not saying you got to get up the next day, but what we have to do is get that sense. Everyone's going to cover their head, with the covers and
give ourselves time
all over again and not brush your hair. It's totally fine. Okay. It's how we go. But the first part of that is simply just finding a routine again. There is something to be said for structure and deciding to just start to wash, rinse, and repeat again in your life. And then before any of the things that I love that we've talked about as far as putting your grief to work or getting out there and using it is after you take care of your emotional needs.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that takes me back to what I talked about in the beginning, is that I think that some people underestimate the things that they've experienced and they don't take the time to really find out what that is. Is that therapy for you? Is that a support group? Is that just finding one of your really close friends? But there is a very intimate, private healing process that is just super important. Look, my pet losses are devastating. Every time I lose a pet, I'm like, I am never doing this. I am never getting another dog until I do. Because I'm like, wait, why do I want another dog? Because I want joy in my life again. I want joy. I want to feel that joy. And what's great is that you do get there, but the first place is your emotions. Don't try to be anything to anyone. So go ahead.
I was thinking about, like, even in loss, like we even grieve the old version of ourselves.
It's so true. I'm considering that for like an entire book. And it's funny because after my speeches, it was my very first speech, and you get through it. I'm like, yes, this is so easy. The very first question that I got from this woman is, she said, I am terrified that I am never going to be the person I used to be. And I just started sweating and I started panicking because I was not going to lie to this woman. And the truth of the matter is, she's not. And I'm trying to figure out how to nicely say that to someone, because I don't want someone to be spending a lot of time trying to capture something that is in fact not completely there anymore. You don't lose all of yourself. That old version does go.
Yeah, I like to use the version of how we evolve as from our stages of being, the egg and the sperm, going into becoming a baby, growing from that phase to a toddler, then we have our adolescence. Those are all stages that we physically go through. Like, life is telling us, nature itself is telling us that we will go through changes, and it is inevitable.
It is inevitable. And I found for myself, and I did do many of the stages of grief, but I found for me that more than anything, I found myself moving on in grief when I was getting really frustrated, I wasn't really angry, but I felt like, and it was almost like I just wanted to kind of bust out. And I was like, okay, you're ready for a next phase. You're ready for that next phase of healing from this loss. So it wasn't something that was very definitive for me. It was more of a frustration breakthrough type situation. I do think that anger is real. I know that it's something that I think people go through very, very differently. I wasn't somebody that was I wasn't angry at the world, but I did find myself, I think because I was younger, I found myself, I think that what was so frustrating for me when I was younger is that, what does loss look like? I mean, people look at you and they don't know what you've been through, I mean, I'm 25 years old. I don't look like somebody who's been through all of the things that I've been through. And, I've got some, mediocre manager trying to tell me how harsh life can be. And I just wanted to stuff his tie in his mouth. I think that when you start to really understand how much you've gone through and how much you've learned, I think that it can be frustrating when the world's like, you just need to understand the ways of the world. Believe it or not.
I am. There's
Thanks.
Goodness, there's two comments in here that I think they encompass exactly what we were talking about. Sonia Larray, she mentioned exactly that healing builds and brings for resilience that allows you to move on a deep level of compassion and purpose. And I think, how you said with the manager that was trying to tell you how to grieve.
Please don't explain it to me right now, sir. I don't want to have to stuff your tie in your mouth. Yes, but I love what she just said, because and that is part of the incredible healing process, is that you start to, I will tell you that a superpower, and it's come a long way, and it is an absolute superpower in leadership, is empathy. And people who have been through loss become deeper, more compassionate, more powerful people. And don't ever let someone tell you that to understand another person, to understand what someone else is going through, and to have that heightened sense is weakness, or, oh, don't be nice to too many people. That is noise. Tune it out. It is empathy, I'm telling you, is it's a strong intuitive trait to be incredibly proud of. And people that go through loss, it's just, you get such a sense of understanding of what other people around you are going through. And it's something to take into your private life and into your work life.
Yeah. Sure. Just thinking about what your manager said, I think the first thing I thought of was like, oh, maybe he didn't spend enough time with himself to grieve the things in his own life, or people are projecting all the time.
Yes.
Yeah. So I thought, that might be something
that he also, full
with.
Disclosure, not sure he knew everything that I'd been through. I think that what I was trying to articulate is that I think that's when I got the angriest, because I really wasn't someone who talked a lot about what I was going through. Okay. I was very private about it for a very long time. And, now I run around the country and tell everybody, but clearly something's changed in me. And I think that's something else that, to understand that if you are guarded about your grief, it's okay. There's a portion of my book that I call Hiding in Plain Sight. And there will come a time in your life that if you just don't feel like talking about it, don't talk about it. It's not a place to stay forever. But, sometimes people, when I was younger, would always surround, compliments or not compliments, promotions or small celebrations. And they'd be like, oh, your parents must be so proud. I'm like, yeah, they are. I didn't feel like explaining that there wasn't a wholeness to me in that sense, that there was, I didn't have that. And I think that sometimes if you have the chance and you decide not to talk about what you're going through, you just need a break. You just need a break from what you're experiencing. And, if you're going through a divorce and someone says, how's your marriage? And you just don't feel like talking about it, I'd be like, thumbs up, because you're not hiding from forever.
Yeah.
But it becomes a very heavy thing that we do. These moments of adversity, these moments of loss and grief that we experience at times, just take a break. Don't give too much information if you don't feel like it.
Mm.
And I know that I'm probably a mental health professional's like, Jamie, don't say that. And I don't mean it as a lifestyle, but I do mean that there were times in my life that it was just heavier than me.
Mm.
And I needed some time to just, I kind of see it this way. I felt like I had turned a boat upside down and just gotten into the part where it was capsized.
Oh
Like, I was
gosh,
aware that my life was not in a great place, but I
you
just
just have
needed a
enough
minute to breathe and to
Mhm.
just not be the person that this thing happened to. And that will happen along your life. It's okay.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's Sonia shall mention something like that too. I personally feel the first area I had to step into is trying to conjugate a clear sentence.
Absolutely.
Mm.
It is basic functioning
Mm.
in life again. It's amazing how you just need to be able to, and it's important to surround yourself with good people.
Yeah.
And that's where I think grieving in the modern age is very difficult for people. We constantly have messages and things, and everything's coming in, and life is moving at lightning speed. So remember, turn your phone off, turn it off, and just take some time to get back into a routine that fits you,
Mm.
and then let the rest in. Then let the rest in, and but yourself and your relationship with yourself and your own structure is the first place that you have to get steady.
Mm.
Everybody else will get over it. It's your grief. Do it any way you want.
I like that. It's your grief. Do what you want, and don't
If
let
somebody
anyone
wants to know
tell you
about it and you're
how to
not
grieve.
ready, they'll wait.
Mm.
They'll wait.
Yeah. I was wondering for people who isolate themselves and just as I guess, a normal response for them, um, would you have them also to isolate too, like in the grieving process?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Like for people that already that are like introverts
Yes.
and they isolate themselves, would you recommend that they still continue to isolate themselves in that kind of space or
Not forever. I do believe that when life impales us with something,
Mhm.
we are initially going to do the thing, our own defense mechanisms, the way that we are as people. We can't stop being the human condition that we are. So if you are someone who likes to talk a lot, you're probably going to run and want to talk about it. And if you're an introvert, you're going to want to reel in. And I think everybody, to a certain extent, pulls in after a wound. I think we're more like animals that way. You
Yeah.
want to retreat a little bit. You want to spend time. But the reason that I would say not forever is because what I did find is that though I wasn't ready to engage in it yet,
Mhm.
simply walking down the streets and going to get a coffee and walking back and being around life and watching life happen
Mm.
was very helpful to me.
So it's
I
a
wasn't ready
reminder.
to engage. I wasn't ready to, and no one wears that, hey, I'm grieving t-shirt. I'm just saying,
I'm gonna
and
start
who would want to? You know what I mean? I mean, good luck with that. But the only thing I would fear, and full disclosure, I obviously majored in psychology, but I'm not a clinical psychologist. So I don't want to
Mhm.
come from that point of view. But just from the experience that I have had, I did pull in for a long time after my mother died. It was probably more than, I was 13 when my best friend died, and you're still kind of being told what to do. So I didn't really I kind of grieved the way my parents told me to a little bit.
Mhm.
But I did pull in. But what I did find is that without the outside influences to just see that life was happening, I got into sort of a dark run. You get into sort of I couldn't quite find any hope there for a while. And so it was important to go out into the world, and hopefully you have a job where you can still just sort of go and watch. It's just weird. Like, you watch the street lights go and people are driving and everybody's like, you're like, wow, life's really gonna just go on, isn't it? It's a strange reintroduction to the fact that people are just moving around every day. And you're like, oh, okay. But there is something very healing in that, so that you can start to take those steps. So don't isolate for too long.
I was talking to one of my colleagues. His name is Doyen Frazier, and he's the founder of a company called Leptokinetics. And then we were talking about like how movement is energy,
Yes.
and that can provide, I guess, maybe a frequency for us because we are still and because we're in a place of isolation,
Mm-hmm.
that when we see that movement, it is maybe appealing to the part of us that knows that needs that healing. So maybe being in that space, we will borrow that kinetic energy from the people to get us kind of moving.
Yes, it will.
Yeah.
The serotonin, the dopamine, the good part of us starts to look around and says, oh, look, someone's, laughing with a friend. Look, someone's drinking coffee. Look, someone's, moving. And speaking of which, I was always very lucky because I've enjoyed running and working out.
Mm.
And I increased those things. And it doesn't mean that you have to start, working out. But what I will say is taking a walk, is doing even the simplest things that maybe then, especially for the introvert, take a walk once a day and just get outside and smell the smells of what goes on of spring and of, if you're in LA, exhaust. And wherever you're living, hopefully it's something better than usually what we have here in LA. But
and then so they can filter the exhaust.
And you're like, look, it's nice. Look, everybody survived. And then add a friend to the walk. And then add things to your life again, because it's simply putting things back in again and finding
building the community.
Yes.
Got it. Gosh. So what would be like, you mentioned that grief can cause us to be successful, and we can use that in leadership. What would be some main key points that you would want people to take away from this conversation?
So what I would like for people to do when they think that they're ready in healing, and this is basically the crux of my keynote speech, is let's, again, when you're on that healing road, because when you're not, you're fine. Do the things you need to do to protect yourself. But when you're ready, there is a very unique CEO type leader that starts to grow inside of people that are overcoming loss. Okay. And the acronym that I use that gets me to CEO is courage, empathy, and overcoming loss. We've talked about overcoming loss. We've talked about that personal part of it. But never underestimate the courageous person that survives the divorce, that survives the death, that survives the job loss, that survives the traumatic injury that changed something, that came out, that's living the life that they finally want to live. Don't underestimate that, because strength and courage tend to get used interchangeably, and they're in the same church, different pew, as I like to say. Courage is an actual characteristic that is acquired due to the direct result of overcoming a loss. It becomes part of our structure. Strength is great. It's the act of being strong. It's the act of being mentally strong. It's a pattern that we get ourselves involved in to become physically stronger, mentally stronger. But courage is a characteristic. It is something that becomes part of you, that is a very huge part of leadership skills. The courage to get a new job, to go out there and try new things. So there are two major things, just two ideas that I'd love to throw out there for people that are thinking about how they can use it in their jobs. One is decision making. So there's two types of decision making very generally. There's rational decision making, where you already have a number or a theory or a law, and from that information, you make a decision. And then there's everything else in life, which is called intuitive, creative style decision making. And the only person you have to depend on is yourself. And there are three aspects that people that engage and excel in creative decision making that they rely on: personal experience, empathy, and judgment.
Hmm.
All three of those things are something that we must use and that come out of us understanding who we are and how we've survived any of the losses of our lives. And those are the three things that people use that engage in very, very important decision making every day in the workplace. Every day. And the reason you can hone your decision making skills by using the lessons from your loss is because loss experiences create a sharper ability to right size situations.
Wow.
When you've been in a situation you can't control, and when you've had to survive that, pull that out and take it into the workplace, there is nothing you can't do.
Wow.
There is really, the sky is the limit. The other part I'd like for people to think about is risk taking. I know it sounds weird, but the characteristics and the strengths of natural risk takers track very similarly to the characteristics and strengths of people that are overcoming loss and that have done it. And there's two major things. The first one is comfortable being uncomfortable.
Okay.
People that take risks are just comfortable being in uncomfortable places. What is more uncomfortable than loss, than adversity, than these things that these amazing life events that we go through? They give us this space of living through this uncomfortable time, this incredibly painful time. So how do you use it in your job? When you've outgrown your job, get a new one. When you feel like you're doing well in your job and it's your yearly review, ask for more money. Is it going to be uncomfortable? Yeah, it's going to be an uncomfortable conversation. Is it as uncomfortable as some of the worst things that you had to go through in your life? It's just not. It's a number. There's room in people's lives for healthy risk. Remember that surviving these events that we go through really provides us, there's pain. We talked about it. You keep it private. You don't have to tell everybody your story. We know it's always going to be painful. But in this hand is the power that came from it. So when it's time to negotiate your better jobs, when it's time to go out there and get more education, when somebody needs to be the manager of the store and you're like, you know what? I'm going to do it. Because you're going to walk in with the power that you got from here. And there is endless ways to never forget that your own personal life is part of what makes you a leader. MBAs are wonderful. Education is wonderful. Books are wonderful. All the education that we get. But remember the important education that you have learned from just surviving your own life and surviving your own existence. And that's why the relationship with yourself is so important, and being able to heal properly so that you can start to use these things. Understand, I am 30 years down the road of losing my mother. I'm not asking people to understand this right away. It is a constant healing process. All I ask is don't hide it away somewhere and go, that's a time frame in my life. For a while, yes. But then your courage will kick in and you get in there and you pull out the parts of that you need. And you pull out the parts that make you the deeper, stronger person. And then go be the CEO somewhere. Go make money. Go do the things that you want to do.
Love that.
So that's what we do. That's how you can, believe it or not, turn these situations into power.
I appreciate that you said that, yes, schooling is great and having our accolades and these degrees are also great, but never underestimate the experience that you have, because nobody can teach you what that feels like.
Exactly.
They can't.
And no one experienced it the way that you did.
Yes.
And what's great about that is then you get your own leadership style. You're not being told from a textbook how to be a leader. Don't get me wrong. Read books about leadership. I love reading books about leadership. But because I understand how I survived those and I understand the power that I got, it helps me customize my leadership. It helps me customize how I want to be a leader in my life.
Mm. Well, we have wrapped
Can you
up.
believe this amount of time gone by? It's like,
I know, time flew by so.
See, because I have the gift of gab. I mean, geez.
And it is a beautiful gift. And I totally forgot to
It's
tell
a good gab.
I totally forgot to tell people that you're also a speaking coach. My bad. So
don't worry about it. It's my newest. It's my the newest thing I've added to my arsenal.
Well, besides being a comedian and a life coach, and what else did you do?
A speaker. That's what we had.
Yeah. No. There's
No, was there something else? Hang on. Oh, my run-on sentence book.
Oh yeah. No, but the book that you have coming out. I wrote down that it was Hidden in Plain Sight. Is that Hidden in Plain Sight?
That's one of my chapters.
A chapter? What's the name of your book? That's
okay. So I'm almost set on betting on better, but I'm not sure. I'm still I don't know. Naming it. It's like naming a child, I suppose.
Yeah, we'll just
that's the one I love
inside of here and pick a name.
Pick a name out of it. Exactly.
We'll come back to that. But
right.
I wanted to finish up our round robin session, which consists of questions that help people get to know you better. And then after that, if you can let people know where they can find you online.
Yes.
Are you ready for those questions?
I am. Give it to me.
All right. So the first one is question number 13. What's your most embarrassing memory?
Oh, this is great. So do you want a grief one or just like in general? Let me do a grief one because it's really funny. So I was 27 and I just lost my mom. And so I thought what would be a really great idea would be to get into a really serious relationship before I was entirely ready at all. And so I was failing miserably at trying to be a girlfriend and, wasn't talking about my life, totally closed up. So naturally I got dumped. It's fair. And so I'm in New York City and I decided I was going to get my groove back because I don't care. I've got this, I'm my girlfriends and I, there's an art exhibit in New York City and I'm walking up the street and I have lost my job. I have been dumped by my boyfriend pretty much in the height of grief. So let's just say it's not a high point in my life. But I'm headed out to an art exhibit and I look down the street and I would recognize that walk anywhere. And I knew it was my ex. And next to him was this super tall, gorgeous thing that I'm assuming looked like a model in this like gorgeous dress. I mean, she's like prettiest woman I've ever seen in my life. So I did what any good human being would do, any normal human being would do. I jumped in a construction dumpster. Because I had been humiliated enough. I'm in a little black dress. I look fabulous, by the way. I am sitting. It was not a trash dumpster, at least. And I'm sitting in here. And I'm like, you're going to go in there. And you are going to find out exactly what she looks like. And what am I doing? I'm like, go get me a drink. She goes in. My girlfriend comes back. She leans into my dumpster. And she literally looks at me and she goes, well, you're very funny. And you have nice hair. I'm like, she's gorgeous. So she's like, I'm not going in there. And so I sat in a dumpster and drank my Cosmo and then I went home. So that is a highlight of my life. I'm like, I am sitting in a dumpster. I mean, even if you grade it on a curve, I'm not making it. I'm not
Oh man, I would have loved to
there
watch
you go.
it. Oh my gosh.
That's great.
Oh, geez. All right. Our next question is, what's your favorite thing about what you do?
Watching my audiences get it. Watching these people sit there and by the end of it, I can see a look on their face that they think they've got a plan and that they think that they're going to be okay. Because I think that I've spent so many days in my life worried for myself in the throes of grief that I just wasn't going to be okay. And now I'm convinced that with this last part of my career and dedicating it to other people is making sure that people understand that no matter what, I promise you, when I talk by the end of this talk, you're going to at least understand that you're going to be okay. And empowering those people to do that.
Thank you. Enlightenment is the first thing that I thought.
Yes. Good word. Good word.
All right. 49. Last question. What's drum roll?
Get out of the dumpster, Jamie. You got a question.
Don't jump in the dumpster. What's the best advice a mentor ever gave you about the industry?
Be authentic. You have, especially when I was in, show business, he's like, this one, it's actually, his name is David Mamet. He's a pretty famous playwright. And he was a teacher. He was one of my teachers. And he said, girl, you got a face that kind of looks like a lot of other people. I'm like, okay. Okay. I'm like, okay. And he's like, so people are always going to want you to, be like them, or they're going to say, hey, do this thing, or be like this person, or give me this kind of a person. And he said, you know what you have to do? Just be authentic. And he's like, not everybody's going to like who you are. They'll get over it, but be who you are.
I'll tell you, Jamie, I mean, we've been in Toastmasters together, and I know that whenever we have a conversation, you're always present. So I assume that people that are present are always authentic with themselves and others that they talk to. So thank you. Please tell everybody where they can find you.
Yes, please. My website is jlcoachchat.com. That's where you can find me. And I also, my blogs are there, and I am considering also, so stay tuned, it'll be on my website. I want to start some workshops. Cool. So stay tuned for that. I want to sort of put a little
it's going to be called Diving in the Dumpster.
Dumpster and ex-boyfriends. Oh, and by the way, he actually found me on Facebook last week, and I was like, I jumped in a dumpster for you. I am not friending you. Okay, we're not talking about bad stuff. And because I want to do, I don't know if I'm going to do a hybrid or in person, but I would like to start doing that. And so that's where you can find me, is on my website. It'll be all my story and the introduction to the book that's coming and all the things that I write about. So
awesome. Well, everybody, thank you for joining us. Girl, they're blowing you up in the chat.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're
it has
welcome.
Been wonderful.
Yes, thank you. So if you can hold on for a second. All right, everybody. So I will be putting all of Jamie's information in the chat. Not in the chat. You know what I mean. On the social media places. Oh, look at that. We have some of our Toastmasters buddies on here. So I'm going to read a few of these.
I haven't been in a dumpster in 16.
Yeah. Oh, my gosh. All right, everyone. Thank you so much again. Appreciate you. Lucy. Love it. Love it. Look at these. So once again, Jamie's going to have her workshop. I think she's going to call it dumpster diving.
Dinner in a dumpster.
All right, everyone. Have a good night.